Hey kids, howdy and welcome. For the last week of June, it's Conscious Embodiment, Astrology, and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox for 24th of June through the 30th of June. We are wrapping up this month. It's actually a very quiet week astrologically, having just come through the first of two Capricorn full moons and a solstice of last week. So we're in a bit of a quiet week. So I'll talk about the couple of things that are happening. But first, question. I got a really interesting question, and I wasn't certain if I was going to read this on the podcast, and I think you'll see why in a moment. But I talked it over with Zoe. Zoe's the producer, and Zoe said, "Go ahead. It's an interesting question," and I kind of agreed. So here goes. Michael writes, "Hi, Michael. My question first. Have you ever heard of anyone identifying or connecting with a spiritual guide that was otherwise indicated in their natal chart?" And I'll just start by saying the answer is no. I haven't really heard of that, but I want to talk about why that's a fabulous idea. So let me continue with his email. For me personally, I've had the experience of connecting with a guide directly associated with the planet Venus, specifically Inanna, or Inanna. He's spelling that Inanna, who in summer was associated with the planets. Then he goes on to talk about his North Node in Venus is conjunct in his natal chart in the sign of Taurus. So he was pointing that out as, does this maybe have something to do with, my ability, I'm speaking for him, to connect with a spirit guide associated with Venus. So he goes on and speaks a little bit more, but the essence of the question is available in what I've already read. And I don't want to get into the specifics of his chart. The first hesitancy I had about maybe not answering this question is the first line of Michael's email was very literal. Have you ever heard of this? And my literal answer was, well, no, I don't know that I have, except that the idea of using things in your chart to contextualize what you might respond to in certain areas is partly what astrology is all about, right? So I may have never heard of being used in this particular way, but every time I teach my class on radical forgiveness, I do a whole teaching on people's placement of Venus in their chart, because Venus, being the planet of the heart, is how we forgive. Forgiveness is ultimately an emotional process where we untangle a resentment that's connected to blame. We release the blame, and then we're able to free ourselves from the resentment. And Venus is the part of astrology, sort of planet landscape, that does that. So that idea, and the multitude of ways that I might sit with anybody and their chart and say, well, your Mercury's in this sign, therefore I might instruct you to meditate in this way or that way. The chart is a beautiful template for the archetypes that run a person. And certainly one could say that a spiritual practice is designed to get us into, and I'm putting air quotes around this, living in the heart. I put air quotes around that because, what does that even mean? I know that it means energetically and sensation-wise that we live in the center of us so that when we're knocked off balance, we come back to center more easily. And certainly as somebody who has a lot of physical sensation connected to my own meditative practices, and Michael mentions the sort of the joys of being in a body, and I have that experience, in spades. Any practice is designed to get you into some kind of an alignment, and heart-centered, air quotes again, is certainly the way to go. And so if you have an experience like Michael describes, because later he talks in his email about his personal experience of hearing me on Michael Sandler's podcast, getting interested in astrology, having a reading, learning about his personal Venus and North Node placements, and having that self-reflective act lead him to a spirit guide that I would call that a bona fide experience. It smacks of what happens when somebody leans into their archetypal nature. It certainly reminds me of the active imagination that I teach in some of my process classes, where I'm trying to train people to do what Michael did organically, which is to get connected to some mental stimulation, like something in his chart, but then to allow the unconscious to sort of respond in a kind of non-rational way, introduce you to a spirit guide. Or in the case of some of the process classes, get you connected to something that's in the unconscious that's blocking you. Right? The unconscious operates in the world of symbolism. And so what Michael did was he looked at the structural elements of his chart and allowed the symbolic beauty to rise up and alert him to its presence. And now he has a relationship with his spirit guide that clearly is aligned with his natal Venus. So he thinks he needed the astrologer to verify that as being so or not. And I'm going to say, because he had that experience, that's the verification. That's the proof that I need. Not like I have a yes or a no to that in my sort of tool of what I know. It's that I read his email and I thought, that sounds like an experience of using your perception of the chart to allow something phenomenal to occur in your unconscious process that does, in fact, relate to your multidimensional identity and a specific way that you, Michael, line up with your own divine nature in practice using your chart as the first inspiration. So it is a very slim week. There's not a whole lot for us to talk about, which I'm actually really grateful for, because we're sitting here recording this podcast today and I'm in puppy hell. A lot of you know that I have a puppy because I've been sharing on it on social medias, mostly on Instagram. And if you want to see puppy pics and be kept abreast of my puppy journey, follow me on Instagram.
What's her name again?
Dreams. Dr. Lennox Dreams, Drlennox. Oh, what's her name?
The puppy.
The pup. I'm so sorry. I thought it was like my handle's name. No, my puppy's name is Penelope. Her name is actually Empress Penelope. The Empress came first as an idea. I needed a wife. You know what I mean? I was looking for a love of my life. I'm looking for the being that will love me unconditionally, because I thought by now I'd have a husband. So her name at the rescue was Penny, which is cute enough, but it was about the Big Bang Theory characters. I was like, So I just thought Penelope. That popped into my head because it's Penny's a derivative of Penelope.
Right.
And then it's like, ooh, Penelope is cute. She's also the devoted wife of Odysseus.
Oh.
And every night she sort of unweaves what the psyche of what happens during the day so that he will return to her. Oh, I'm getting teary. So it's like, ooh, Penelope, devoted wife, is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a love in my life to sort of feed my heart in a way and allow me to feed, another being in service. So I am as we're recording this podcast today, I am in my third day of no sleep.
Mm-hmm.
My depression levels are elevated since long COVID, so I have cried more in the last 3 days, I think, than in the last 6 weeks. But she's a love, and we've got two things to talk about, and so let's just dive in and do the Black Moon Lilith changing signs and a little thing that Jupiter and Chiron are engaged in. Big news this weekend with our friend Black Moon Lilith. Black Moon Lilith is changing signs on Saturday and moving into the sign of Libra, having spent the last 9 months in Virgo. So let's just start with the basics. What is Black Moon Lilith? The black moon portion of Black Moon Lilith has to do with, obviously, the moon. And it relates to the orbit of the moon around the Earth as a function of its wobble. You know, the fantasy would be that the moon just spins around the Earth in a perfect circle. But that ain't how it is. They pull on each other in a dynamic thing that we would look at, if we could see it, as a wobble. Mm-hmm. The moon sort of wobbles out, wobbles in. And there's a calculated mean of that wobble that, from the Earth's perspective, up to that invisible mathematical calculation of the wobble, is called black moon. So because it's connected to the moon, it relates to the unconscious, because that's what the moon is, the arbiter of everything that's unconscious. But the basic sense of unconscious that the moon is describing to us when we look up there at her brilliant brightness at night is she's saying, "Hi, sun, I see you, Mr. Conscious Awareness. You think you're all that in a bag of chips, but I have the unconscious that's behind me. And it's the size of all of outer space and the entire universe." And that really is how large our unconscious minds are. We really can't touch the depths of our unconscious mind, because think of that as outer space. And so the moon is a beautiful symbol for that, because she sits between us and outer space, reflecting sunlight back, saying, here's the edge of what you can see with your conscious awareness, the face of the moon. So our conscious awareness goes from Earth to the face of the moon. So this black moon point is in between the Earth and the moon. So it's unconscious material that we are absolutely going to trip on, because it's bubbling up from the unconscious into our walking space. That's the image I want you to get from the fact that it's in between the Earth and the moon's orbit. Now, I have no idea when and why Western astrology combined this idea of black moon as Black Moon Lilith. It's just beyond my knowledge, can't speak to it. If anybody out there is listening is a classically trained astrologer and knows that, let me know. But they did. And so we have Black Moon Lilith. Lilith was the first woman made by the side of Adam in equal stead in the Canaanite origin stories. Now, I'm not a biblical scholar, so it did not go like this that I'm about to describe. So don't come at me if this is inaccurate. It's good enough for the girls I date. It's like the way I want to say it, right? That in the beginning, you had the Israelites had Adam and Eve, and the Canaanites, who were goddess worshipers, had Adam and Lilith, where Adam and Lilith were both made from clay. Only at some point there was this, she won't submit to Adam. We don't like that. And so Eve created in the Israelite story as a subservient being made from his rib was something that, and again, don't come at me, biblical scholars, that when the Jews went to Babylon and they wrote the Old Testament as we kind of know it today, the Canaanite goddess worshiping stories were out, Eve was in, and the patriarchy got established. Mm-hmm. And man was supreme to woman who came from his rib. And you can see where thousands of years later we have gotten into so much trouble because of that. So Lilith then includes the disowned feminine power, the raging, creative, and destructive force that we in the West don't have a symbol for. You know, in the East, they have Kali. In other cultures that I don't know about, there are ferocious feminine archetypes that understand, and here's what's missing. A true feminine archetype has to understand that creation and destruction are the same thing. So Lilith knew that. Mm-hmm. Eve doesn't know shit. Eve's just like, what do you want me to do next? So adding Lilith to Black Moon then adds a layer of sexuality, because Lilith was sort of deemed as a sexual deviant, which, was the best way that the patriarchy could say, don't go in the direction of that power because it's deviant. And then I'm put into mind the millions of women who are holding the wisdom of Gaia for thousands and thousands of years that the Christians just murdered. That's a killing of Lilith. So the medicine woman in the village who knew how to be a midwife and a doula and knew the herbs and you went to when you were ill, that's Lilith.
Mm.
We've
The
killed her.
witch.
That's right. We call her a witch. We discard her as a demon. She's a sexual deviant. That's a great way to disown our feminine power.
Mm-hmm.
And without the feminine power that knows creation and destruction, then we're not operating in the full scope of what it is to be here in existence itself. So, Black Moon Lilith is an invisible point that is measurable and has a moving perspective, and that moving perspective causes it to move 30 degrees, the width of a sign, in 9 months' time. I think that's interesting because it's the human gestation period, and we're talking about profound, feminine, creative, and destructive energy. Think of birth itself. Birth itself is creative and destructive. It's bloody. It's violent. There's rippings and tearings. It's deadly. And it's creative. It's the most important creation there is. But you don't get one without the other. Anyway, I got off track and I'm repeating myself. The point is, the sign that Black Moon Lilith is in tells us where the deepest and richest shadow work is being done. In Libra, it's all about our relationships. I think it's hysterical that Black Moon Lilith is moving into Libra when I'm getting a puppy.
Yeah. Totally.
Which is a whole dynamic relationship experience that includes shadow. I've already had it for the 3 days she's been here, where it's like, I love you and I want to kill you both. And I have to somehow contain my rage so that I don't kill the puppy.
Yeah.
And so the rage that came up over these last 3 days, that would be like the unconscious material that Black Moon threatens to throw up. Throw up, not vomit, throw up, like to push up into our experience. Like I sometimes will call Black Moon the manhole cover to the sewage of our psyche, where material that we want to repress and shove down there, things we don't want to look at, things we're afraid of, things that make us feel scared to be ourselves, things that remind us of our shame, everything that we might disown or push down that's going to bubble back up because it must, that's a Black Moon Lilith consciousness as well. So if you just think of the sort of sexual energy, like where's your sex magic in a Black Moon Lilith consciousness, and what are you repressing in a Black Moon Lilith consciousness? So when Black Moon Lilith is transiting Libra, on some level, universally, we're all in an engaged experience for starting this weekend and for the next 9 months, where in the mirror consciousness, meaning how I feel in my insides is going to show up as circumstances on the outside. And if I know that, I can work on my insides and change them in order to have a shift on the outside world. That's the mirror consciousness, or the law of mirrors. And Libra invented that. And because Libra is also the sign of relationships and the reflection that human-to-human interactions go, that does point to relationships being the source of most of the shadow work that you will be up to. And if you want to get a sense of this, if this is a new avatar for you to be working with, look to the last 9 months and just think on this. Black Moon Lilith has been in Virgo for the last 9 months. And that meant the shadow work and the sexual integration that I've been speaking to has been very, very healing, allowing us to dive into shadowy, difficult places and really have a Humpty Dumpty experience where we get shattered by life. That's Humpty Dumpty falling off the wall and getting broken into pieces. And then Black Moon Lilith, who pushed him off the wall, comes along and helps us examine each of our little unintegrated parts to sort of have an integrated healing experience that might have been playing it out over the last 9 months. Take a look at that. Take a look at the house in your natal chart ruled by Libra. Take a look at your relationship life and understand that that is also something to consider, that starting up this weekend for the next 9 months, shadow work changes theme And the theme is love, relationships, the mirror consciousness, and having things on the outside of your experience shift because you understand the work is done on the inside. There's a passing transit that's happening on Sunday that probably influences the last 2 weeks of June and the first week of July. It's a Jupiter transit. This is sort of a minor element of the year, and it doesn't triple transit. It's too early in Jupiter's Gemini trek. But I'll mention it because it's happening, and it has an energetic impact, and because it's a short week. I have the time. So Jupiter is moving through a semi-square with Chiron that peaks on Sunday. Because Jupiter is doing the transiting, meaning he's the faster planet. That's how we language things. We say blank planet is transiting blank planet. And that first planet that's transiting always is the faster moving planet. So Jupiter's doing the transiting. So that tells us the theme of the energy, the sensation of this thing that peaks at the end of the month, but that has a build over the last week or two. So it's been building for the last, bit. It'll build all of this week, peak on Sunday, and sort of wither for the week that follows. That's about how long we experience Jupiter expansions. But this is not a expansive geometry. A semi-square is mild conflict and obstacle energy. It's not a full square, so we're not talking about stopgaps and delays and breakdowns of your plans. It's mild, half that, semi-square, 45 degrees. Because it's Jupiter doing the transiting, we're absolutely talking about our expansions, our manifestation desires, our education, experiences, anything that's Jupiterian. From what you're learning, what you're seeking, and what you're wanting to manifest more of, are going to bump into the wounded consciousness on Sunday in a minor delay, breakdown, problematic sort of transit. That if there's language to this, it would be, hold your horses, kiddo. I see how fast you want to move. Don't move quite that fast. There's some things you might have to clean up in your basement before you want to be sailing forward. So in some ways, I call this a pace-setting transit, because we all want to move at a fast pace, and often the universe says, not quite. You want to take a look at your sort of efficacy and movement in the world and ask yourself, are your wounds getting in the way? Are you bumping up as a result of this transit against moments where you're seeing that, what you desire feels out of reach of your sense of deserving of it? And I talk about that all the fucking time, because you could want something till the cows come home, but if you do not feel deserving of that thing, you will not keep it. You might receive it, but you won't be able to keep it. Think lottery winners who lose all their money. They don't have the consciousness to receive and hold the abundance, so the abundance won't stay. Sabotage. We talk about self-sabotage all the time. It's like a buzzword in New Thought. But you do want to take a look at that. Are there sort of ways in which, because of your childhood patterns, thank you, Chiron, are you hindering what's possible in forward movement? Cleaner language than sabotage. The only time I want anybody to be using the word of sabotage or self-sabotage, or I'm sabotaging myself, is if you're working in active imagination to create an inner part, the part of you that sabotages because of undeserving or wound. Then you can sabotage till the cows come home. The difference being is that if you say, I'm sabotaging myself, that's like declaring that you're not functioning well and that there's big problems led by wound, and it's not accurate.
Yeah.
What we can say is that there's a part of me that feels more connected to my wounded limits than my expanded possibilities. And this transit says, slow down, because you can't quite move with that backpack of wound on. There might be a way in which you need to examine the inner limits in order to move a little bit faster. And for some, this is just going to be a bona fide kind of simple pace setting thing that says, boo hoo, I feel a little hurt that my project isn't happening as fast as I want or as, bountifully as I, experience in my fantasy of it. This transit will generate that last week, this week, and a little bit into the week after. And I'll wrap this into if you find in your explorations this week that you discover something in your psyche that is holding you back and needs some attention, we have a second full moon in Capricorn, which is all about releasing the inner private wounds that keep us from climbing the mountain more powerfully. The second full moon in Capricorn coming up, and the last one behind us is a double opportunity to release wounds that we might call self-sabotaging wounds. And Jupiter and Chiron are giving us just enough sort of like slowdown and alertness to wounds that might need our attention so that we can release them as we go.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. This week we have an email and dream from Kathy. And Kathy says, "Hello, I've been recording and deciphering my dreams for as long as I can remember. And it has been greatly improved by your dream dictionary. So thank you for that."
Ooh, yay.
Yeah, I love that she has the dictionary.
I love it.
All right, here's one that she needs some insight. I am sitting on the ocean side overlooking the water. I have someone with me, but at no point do I ever see that person or gain a sense of who it is. I'm just talking to them about how much I love this place and I want to move closer to the water. For context, my happiest place in the world is Prince Edward Island, Canada. And I was talking about this place as though it was that, Prince Edward Island.
Got it. Yeah, got it.
But it wasn't. And partway through the dream, I realized I'm not where I thought I was.
Ooh, so I'm still getting ready to say how irrelevant that was until now.
Okay.
Now it's
Good.
Not only interesting, but completely relevant. So hang on. She's talking about this place. She realizes I'm not where I think I am.
Yes.
Okay, go. Keep going.
Okay, I'm commenting to my mystery friend about how beautiful the clouds look when suddenly they part on the horizon. Right away, a light blue sports car drives through the gap in the clouds right towards me on the shore. Just as it's about to reach me, it turns 90 degrees and zooms up towards the sky and out of sight. I'm about to comment how crazy that was when a fighter jet comes through the same spot and does the exact same thing, which is zooming towards her and then disappearing. Right after that, a helicopter emerges, and it starts the same way. But as it approaches the shore, it stops, hovers, and then drops into the water. As soon as it hits the water, it morphs into a glass spherical vessel, and I think, oh, it's an observation bubble. Out through a trap door on the top of the bubble appears a man. He calls to me and says he's here to take me on a tour underwater. I excitedly start to climb down the rocks into the vessel when I realize I need to pee.
Ha!
I ask him how long the trip will be, and he says about 2 hours. I need to use the bathroom first. I start to climb up the rocks and then wake up. So, as a little context, I don't know if this helps, but she adds some context that she never wakes up through the night to use the bathroom. And this felt like her subconscious pulling the plug on whatever experience was to come next. She tried to restart the dream, going back to sleep,
Yeah.
but failed.
Okay. I love this dream.
Cool, good.
So much. Before I even get into like even speaking into what I think and feel they might mean, I just love the sort of the way we, it's first it's a sports car, then it's a fighter jet, and then it's a helicopter. And that even right there is beautiful consciousness being expressed. So let's start with the top. The literal practical location of Oceanside means that we're in the dynamic consideration of what happens between conscious awareness and the unconscious mind. The kind of existential idea that all of us as human beings want to find that place where we are aware of what we are aware of, but we allow the unconscious to inform our experience day to day. Waking and sleeping is an interesting sort of binary of this, where we think of ourselves as consciously aware when we're awake and then totally in the unconscious when we are sleeping, and then somehow putting dreaming consciousness together with memory of dreams when we are awake. That's the ocean side, right? That's us in our land consciousness trying to remember what happened in our ocean consciousness. But at the shore, waves of unconscious water put material onto the land that wasn't there before. That's like awareness from the depths coming into availability to us. And at the exact same time, the ocean is pulling sand back into the ocean, removing old land and submerging it. That's like change, where we shift who we are because we let go of old unconscious blocks. So you see the picture I'm drawing between psyche of us and Oceanside. Any dream that takes place at the ocean means that Kathy is in that dynamic place where her unconscious and her conscious mind are talking to her or with each other about her. And here's what we learn. She wants to be even closer to this. So Kathy might think that the dream is about happily ever after on Prince Edward Island. I think it's a dream about craving an even more rich and expressive and responsive relationship with herself in an elevated practice of spiritual connection and self-investigation. At least that's what I'm projecting onto Kathy, because that's how I live my life. So that's when I hear this dream, that's what it's speaking to with me, that I want to get closer to this place. Now, it's not like we couldn't look at this dream as a reflection of Kathy's desires for fabulous real estate. But the fact that she presents this idea that I've just described as getting closer to her authentic, vibrant place, that she's where she's at her level of development, but the dream is showing her that she's not quite there. I'm not where I think I am. So I'm going to sort of reflect the idea that Kathy's in that moment in the dream, she's like, oh, fuck, I'm not where I think I am. Then I'm just going to say it's about her level of development, and the unconscious is letting her know that this is a rich moment for going deeper. That's to me what the dream is knocking on her door and saying, hey, honey, where you are at with your self-investigation, it ain't as rich and vibrant and revealing as where you think you can get to. And there's a moment right now where we have to examine that idea. Like, where's Kathy on this journey? So When the clouds part, we get like the message from the higher self, right? The sky in this dream would be the ideas that come from like divine mind or inspiration that comes from a higher dimension. With the ocean and the land is our very human experience. The clouds parting is like Kathy's higher self coming in and telling her a story. With a light blue sports car, to me, is her throat chakra, blue throat chakra, her word, her perception, her communication at this moment in her life is reflected by the blue sports car that sort of zooms towards her, 90 degrees, splits up to the sky. So to me, that action is just her psyche showing her a sort of a 3-part slideshow. Where the first one is, here's where you're at right now. Here's the car you're driving. It's a sports car. Well done, Kathy. You are elevated in how you're moving through life. Ooh, it's blue, which means you got a strong voice and you're living in your throat chakra as you powerfully drive through life. Then it zips up to the skies because that slideshow is done and Kathy gets that message. Blue car is where you start. Then the fighter jet comes along and does the same thing. I'm going to call that the old ways that don't work. How I fight my battles might be how I learned to fight them a long time ago. And just the idea of fighter jet, that evokes violence, war, conflict solved by blaming. Right? In shadow work, we know to turn within. I am conflicted by you. Rather than blaming you, I'm going to go into myself and say, where's the wound? How old am I in this moment? What is the trouble in my psyche that's allowing me to project that this person means me ill? But if you're not doing that, if you're not looking in, you might be in a fight where someone hurts your feelings and then you spend the experience blaming them. I'm not talking about Kathy. I don't know Kathy. I'm sure Kathy's brilliant at this, but we all have this capacity to fight when we should be exploring what our inner trigger is. So you with me so far?
Yeah.
Okay. Clearly, the helicopter is the way to go.
Right.
Partly we know this because it's the third one that comes, perfect trinity, 1, 2, 3.
Right.
Current state of throat chakra plus my old experience of fight creates a transcendent third, a new idea, helicopter. That's, to me, the power 3, and that it's third. And then doesn't the helicopter coming in creates this tremendous opportunity to do what?
Go into the unconscious.
That's right! Hovers down, drops to the water, it becomes an observation bubble.
Yeah.
But more importantly, let's backtrack a second. What can the helicopter do that the fighter jet can't? It's in her email. She uses the word.
Oh, it approaches her.
Well, but a fighter jet can do that.
I don't know. Go.
I'm putting you on the spot. I'm so sorry. It hovers.
Hover. There you go.
Hovers. That is, in fact, the salient, important consciousness of helicopter over another vehicle that flies through the air. So anything in the air is about thought and thought forms. Because of the vessels, sort of shooting up into the sky, right? We're adding the element of divine thought, higher mind. The helicopter tells us this is the vehicle du jour because you need to hover. You need to go up to higher levels of consciousness to be effective. Then you got to hover down closer to where the action is to do some work, then hover back up. That's the mirror consciousness in action. I don't fighter jet out there zooming at you at, 500 miles an hour to kill. I hover up and down in my own experience of my higher thoughts and my lower thoughts so I can have a richer experience of what's on my insides so I can more powerfully create a magnificent outside experience. And how do we do that? We tour the unconscious. And this man that appears is like a masculine guide that allows her or will allow her to drop into deeper levels in order to see elements in the unconscious that were not possible before. Okay, so let me wrap up with a couple of little strings and a bow. She starts this dream sitting with someone that she does not see or know. So that's interesting to me. I'm not saying that the man she's sitting with is the same man that shows up with the tour, brochure for going into the ocean. But it is interesting to me that there is a male guide that comes, and she doesn't say that the person she's with is a male or female. She doesn't say anything. She just says that she doesn't know them and doesn't see them, but is aware of their presence. That to me is some new idea and maybe even an identity that hasn't quite arrived. There isn't enough space quite yet in Kathy's consciousness for this aspect to inhabit her.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of like what happens when we do like something that some people might call soul retrieval, right? Part of us is stuck in unconscious places from wounds that happened long ago. And when we go down into the unconscious, which is best done in a spherical glass vessel, you can go to those places where those constrictions are, have a release and a relief and shift. Right? So she's shown at the end of the dream that she has everything to go deeper and further. And for me, the waking up to have to pee is like, forget about the physiological element of that might have been part of it. To me, we want to go symbolically. She needs to release some toxins. There's stuff she's got to get rid of that she's been holding on to. And to me, I'm going to put those two images together, that the idea of going into the unconscious to explore connects to something she's been holding on for a while, toxic-like, that she has to let go of. Mm-hmm. So to me, the peeing is part of the message of the dream. The message of the dream is another approach that allows you to go deeper into the unconscious is what is wanted at this time. You have the readiness, you have the guidance system, you have the tools to do it all, and you even know that there's some kind of toxic idea that you've been carrying around for a while, as well represented by, I have to pee. But I don't see that as taking away from Kathy's process. I see it as informing her that she knows everything she needs to know. She has everything she needs to get there. And that she even has a symbol or an image in the dream that sort of shows just how much toxicity she has to let go of. And it's about a bladder full.
That was funny.
Anyway, I love this dream. I'm so glad you chose this one. This is a pretty juicy dream and perfect also for Black Moon Lilith changing signs. Not specifically into Libra or out of Virgos. I don't want to connect the sign to Kathy's dream. But you do this all the time, Zoe, where you pick a dream that somehow resonates to me astrologically, that they sort of relate. Because to me, the helicopter idea, as I described it, to me is shadow work in the Libra consciousness. So, Kathy and all of you, and I'll include myself in this, have at it.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.